Hey guys, this is Rob from RuinWorks. I'm bringing you the latest scene entitled The Living Quarters Upper. This is for the Ruins of Grunvyr series. This scene would go alongside the stalactite bridge and stalactite basin scenes. So you can see we have 3 levels as shown by our layer tool up in the top right. Highest level is what I call the private quarters. This is where I think the leaders of a couple of clans and their families would live. The entrance hall, this is where you might enter over here on the right. This is from the stalactite bridge scene and the tower bridge specifically. So you can see I've kind of put that portion of the map on the edge of the scene here, so it's more clearly showing where you will be joining into the scene. And then lastly in the bottom we have the Meadhall, and it also connects to the stalactite basin scene. So as usual, I'm going to run through the scene a bit with a token, show you some of the features that are available with the scene, and just let you see how the scene looks when you have a token running through it. I have 2 tokens here at the main entrance. This again would attach to the stalactite bridge scene. The reason I wanted to start here is that this main entrance hall has a few features here. So in the purple, we can see some controls. I'll highlight at the bottom here. First we have cycle floor image, so we can start with just a solid floor. We can go to the cracked floor, or we can have a broken floor immediately. The reason I've provided these options is because I have included a trap over about this portion of the scene, and there's 2 ways in which we can activate this trap. It is essentially the floor will crumble in this location, sending the tokens in this area down to the Meadhall level and actually into the Meadhall. So in the right here, we have 2 ways of controlling the trap. We can have the trap trigger on enter, so that would be your controls on the left, or you can have a manually triggered trap, and those controls are on the right. The reason I provided 2 controls is because when you turn one on, you can see the trap area is quite big. I believe it's 4 squares by 4 squares. So if you just have it trigger when a token enters, actually I'll leave this token where he was. If you have a token trigger the trap when it enters, the token enters, you can trigger the trap. You can see the floor image in the level below changes, the image here changes, and then you're asked if you want to change the token's elevation as well, like my other previous traps that I've done. So when I click yes here, it only teleports the 1 token down to the next floor. The issue with this is as soon as this token enters the hashed area, the trap triggers. Maybe you don't want it to trigger on just 1 token entering because it is quite a large area. When I was thinking about making this, I thought it would make more sense if the trap triggered as more people enter the area, and the crack, the floor here can only support a certain amount of people. So I might rule it that the trap is only going to trigger if 3 people enter the hashed area, and to modify that for different games would be very difficult. So instead I just made it to give you the option to trigger it manually. So when you trigger it manually, you just hit the on button on the manual trigger. You can see it kind of switches off the ones for the automatic trigger. And then when you hit the trigger trap button in the margin here, it essentially does the same thing as the automatic trap, except the second dialog box that shows up changes. It essentially says the same thing. Tokens can roll saves if you need them to, and if they save, it tells you to move the tokens outside of the hashed area. If you don't, and you hit yes and change all their elevations, all the tokens in that area will automatically drop down. So it's just a bit easier to control the trap this way. You can have you can trigger it manually when you decide that there's enough people. It doesn't even have to be enough people. It could just be a monster is in the area, so maybe it bashes the floor, maybe there's an explosion from a spell or something that is the trigger to the floor collapsing. So those are the 2 ways you can use this trap. The left, the automatic trigger on enter, functions like all my other traps have. The manual trigger will only trigger when you actually trigger the trap button here. The other option here, you can have a solid floor or the cracked floor. So I thought as more tokens enter the area, you might want to start with a solid floor, then introduce the crack to give people a warning that the floor might be breaking, and only then, if the trigger is on, you can trigger the trap after those images have been changed. So just a bit of a progress for the floor should you want to use it that way. Next, I'll draw your attention to this area here. These strange little alcoves in the wall. Dwarves have rigged the slab to fall down should they need it to block off the entrance in case they're being attacked by somebody. So up in the room, just north of these two alcoves, you can see a little lever here. If you were to take our token over here, it could trigger the lever. And if we go back over, now we can see there's a slab in place. And if we bring our token back, let's say that your player's coming back around, they'll say, oh no, this exit has now been closed. If they run back to the lever again, trying to open it, if they want to get out the same way they came, the lever is no longer working. And that was by design of the dwarves in my mind. This was just like an emergency, close this door, we don't want it to open up, just drop a slab of stone in there. So that is what this interaction point can do, just block off the passage that exits the scene here. And if you want to reset it, there's a button in the right margin, and it'll change all the walls back to being invisible and ethereal. And then it also resets the interaction point so that it works again. And if you don't want to use the interaction point at all, you can go to your tiles, just delete it, and instead drop the slab manually. Again, there's just a manual trigger here, and that'll move the slab down to block the door. In the walls of the scene, I've just put a little bit of lore. So as you can see, this passage kind of comes out of the entrance hall and into this set of rooms, but this set of rooms does not directly connect to the rooms over here to the south. This was done on purpose, as I imagine this northwestern section to be a clan hall, so an enclosed area that is only occupied by a certain clan, and then down here in the bottom it would be a different clan. So the clan in the northwest I called the Sullenstones, and in the south I called them the Gravelhearts. Obviously you can change those or use that as you see fit, and there's just little rhymes or sayings of those clans that I would imagine are written on the floor or written in the walls on these carvings here, just to give a bit of flavor to the scene for you. Further into the middle of the scene, we got this little CW1 marker. If you go over to the left, the same color, it says toggle crumbling wall. I'll bring a token here, as the walls should change when you use the toggle button. So when you use it, you can see the wall actually ends up crumbling, and now you can add a passage here between the two sections. I'll note on the Meadhall as well, there are a couple of other areas where you have the same options. So we have CW2, Crumbling Wall 2, and Crumbling Wall 3. And again, their buttons are just single click in the margins for you to change them as you see fit. So those are most of the interactive items here. What I'll do is I'll run through all the halls quickly with a token just so you guys can see what it looks like. All right, guys, that brings us to the end of the living quarters scene. Hope you like it. I'll talk to you soon. There's going to be a Patreon vote coming out this month, so keep an eye out for that. For the first half of July, I will likely be working on the V12 update, as all the modules have now been updated. All my dependent modules have been updated. We can look forward to some V12 action in the near future. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. I know V11 took me almost a month to get that update all complete. Pretty sure there'll be less issues this time around. So fingers crossed. Thanks everyone. Bye for now.